Notre Dame continues its month-and-a-half-long hot streak on the recruiting trail with the commitment of one of the most powerful running backs in the country. But can the Irish keep it rolling and finish with the number one class in the nation? We're breaking it all down right here on Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome into another edition of Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm Tyler Wojciak, and I'm the host of this program. I'm a producer at Fox Sports and have been covering the Irish since 2020. I'm thrilled to have you here with me on Thursday, May 15th, and thanks for making this your first watch or listen of the day. I have a couple quick reminders for you before we get started. First, please subscribe on YouTube or your preferred podcast app if you have not already. And second, the Friday mailbag is back this week. If you want your question featured on tomorrow's show, drop it in the YouTube comments, send it over on X at Locked On Irish, or DM the show on Instagram at Locked On Irish Pod. I'll be answering your questions about Notre Dame football, recruiting, and everything in between tomorrow. So get those questions in. But first, we have got a big episode lined up for today. We're going to start things off by breaking down the commitment of four-star running back Jonaz Walton and what his addition means for Notre Dame's 2026 recruiting class. Then we'll dive into the biggest remaining needs for the Irish in this cycle. And finally, could Notre Dame actually finish with the number one class in the country, because they're number two right now, and USC just lost their top commit in their number one ranked class. So with all the momentum that Notre Dame has been building, it's not out of the question. So let's get into it. Let's talk about what Notre Dame is getting in four-star running back Jonaz Walton. Walton's commitment, along with the commitment of four-star running back Javian Osborne, solidifies Notre Dame's backfield for the class of 2026, and it could end up being the best running back tandem in the country this cycle. He's 5'9" in all of 205 pounds. Not the tallest guy in terms of height, but man, he is stout, and he is ranked number 124 nationally, and he's the number 10 running back in the 24/7 Sports composite. Osborne is ranked slightly higher than Walton. Osborne is number 91 in the country and the number 6 running back, but landing one running back ranked in the top 10 in a class is a big accomplishment, let alone two who actually complement each other pretty well. And Walton became a priority for Notre Dame back in December of 2023 when Deland McCullough first offered him. And Deland McCullough deserves a lot of credit in this recruitment. Obviously, Jaywan Sider is the guy who got it done, but it was McCullough who recruited Walton early on in the process, and he generated a lot of that initial interest. And Walton was on campus for junior day in January and then made his way back to South Bend for an unofficial visit in early April. And let's be honest, once McCullough decided to leave Notre Dame for the NFL, I think Walton kind of wavered on Notre Dame there for a little bit. But then once Jaywan Sider became a part of the staff, it was a seamless transition. He started recruiting Walton extremely hard, made him a priority, and that is a big reason why Notre Dame was able to land him. But I also think that visit in early April was crucial for this commitment because it was the first time Walton was able to visit Notre Dame with Sider on the staff. And Notre Dame was actually able to close the deal a little bit earlier than Walton originally planned. He had planned on committing in July, but he pulled the trigger on May 14th. And yeah, he said it was because of Notre Dame's tradition and family atmosphere. But in reality, I think he knew he had to commit to Notre Dame sooner than later to keep his spot, because Notre Dame they already have Javian Osborne, and they're also recruiting Brian Bonner, who's a very talented prospect out of California, and also Desevin Walker. And Walton ultimately chose Notre Dame over some big-time heavyweights in college football like Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee. Stanford was a finalist as well, not necessarily a heavyweight in modern college football. And whenever you see Stanford in the finalist of any top prospect, I like Notre Dame's chances there, because clearly that individual prioritizes academics, and there is no better school in the country where you can marry academics and football like Notre Dame. So this was not an easy commitment for Notre Dame to get, but they were able to land him, and a big part of that has to do with Jaywan Sider's closing ability. He came to Notre Dame as a very well-respected recruiter, what he had done for the Nittany Lions in his 7 years with the program, and he just kept it going as soon as he got on campus at Notre Dame. And Walton spoke with Christian McCullum of Irish Sports Daily, and he had a very interesting quote about Jaywan Sider's pitch. Quote, "One thing that sold us was the success that Katron Allen and Nick Singleton both had at Penn State. They were both freshmen. They came in and they made impacts right away. I feel that could potentially be something that could happen between me and Javian, so I've been sold on it, end quote. So, first of all, great work, Christian, getting that quote, because I think that's really interesting. It's kind of like when Mike Denbrock came over to Notre Dame from LSU, and he was showing quarterback recruits like Deuce Knight video of Jaden Daniels, and I always thought that, like, I understand why he's doing it, but it always felt a little bit weird showing Notre Dame recruits videos of a different college. But hey, it worked out in the case of Javian Osborne and Jonaz Walton as well, because these are two very talented running backs. They could have chosen to go to another school where they were probably the feature back in the class. All the hype was around them, but they decided to join forces, and they looked at what Sider did, rotating Singleton and Allen at Penn State, and that's a big reason why Notre Dame was ultimately able to land both of these prospects. For Walton, I think he's got a very powerful lower body, great leg drive, and he has a very physical running style. And his physicality extends beyond just running. He's pretty solid at blitz pickups, and he is not afraid to block downfield. It's kind of funny watching some of his high school tape where he's out in the open. He doesn't even have the ball, but he's looking to light someone up. I think he's got a mean streak in him, and in really all phases of the game. You don't always see that from a player of his caliber. Like if a top guy doesn't have the ball and his teammates running down the field, he might not be inclined to go out there and try to block someone, because it's like, look, I'm probably going to get the ball the next play and score anyway. But that is not the case with Jonaz Walton. He's also been insanely productive throughout his career in high school football. He's already racked up 4,445 all-purpose yards in high school, because he's also the punt and kick returner. He also has 3,070 rushing yards and 918 receiving yards. He has one more year left, and he's playing football in Georgia. So you know he's playing against good competition. His offense primarily runs out of the pistol, and he's very effective in screen passes in short yardage situations. They even split him out into the slot so he can just catch a screen pass, and then he's already in the open field going up against much just smaller defensive backs those poor kids, man. They're in high school. They're not nearly as big as Jonaz Walton. They're tasked to tackle him in the open field. Not a whole lot of fun for that kid, but I was once that kid a long time ago. Personally, my only concern about Walton is that he tends to bounce the ball outside a little bit when he doesn't have to. Kind of reminds you of Jadarian Price. That works in high school. I don't think he's quick enough to do that in college consistently, but he does have track speed. So once he gets the ball outside, he can take it the distance. He actually just finished second in the 100-meter dash with a time of 10.66 at the Georgia 4A Track and Field State Championships recently. And even though Osborne and Walton aren't your typical thunder and lightning combination, they do complement each other pretty well. Osborne is very much a north and south runner, and then you have Walton, who's a little bit more powerful than Osborne, but also can break it to the outside. So the question remains, is Notre Dame going to recruit 3 running backs in this class? They might keep the door open for a third running back. It's just a question of who is willing to walk in the door. I love Brian Bonner as a prospect. I've talked about it before on the show. He's got elite breakaway speed, and he's probably the closest thing to Jeremiah Love in this class. He would be like the true lightning prospect that would be a perfect complement to either one of these backs. But is Brian Bonner going to join a class that has 2 running backs already? I just find that hard to believe. Brian Smith, our Locked On Recruiting Insider, comes on the show all the time. We do crossover episodes. He mentioned that Bonner could potentially play wide receiver in college, just given his skill set. So if he's open to that, maybe Notre Dame can land him. And if Seven Walker really wants to come to Notre Dame, I'm sure they would take him. I just don't think either one of these guys will, because they're very talented. They could go to a school and have just better opportunities right away, because they're not going to have to share the wealth among 2 other running backs. And on one hand, it's easy to say that's too many running backs to add 3 in one class. But I also thought 1 or 2 guys would leave the current Notre Dame running back room in the transfer portal this offseason, and that didn't happen. So I'm not ruling anything out at this point. I would find it highly unlikely that they end up taking 3 running backs in this class, but considering they're just stacking that running back room more and more with very talented players, I don't even know what to expect anymore. I guess if you just have 10 running backs in the room, we're all extremely talented, that probably bodes well for the rest of the roster, but I think Notre Dame is going to be just fine with Jonaz Walton and Javian Osborne. All right, Walton's commitment is a major win for the Irish, but the work is not done yet. Coming up, we're going to look at the biggest remaining needs for the Irish in the class of 2026, including some names that are big-time targets. Today's episode is brought to you by WayFair. The days are getting longer, the weather's warming up, and people are spending more time outside, which means it is the perfect time to refresh your outdoor space. Whether you're working with a big backyard or a small balcony, WayFair has everything you need to make it feel more like you. WayFair's massive selection of outdoor essentials makes it easy to transform any space into your ideal summer setup. From comfy conversation sets to sleek dining tables and outdoor decor, they've got it all, and at prices that fit your budget. Personally, I love the mix of styles they offer. Wayfair makes it super easy to find pieces that match your vibe without spending a fortune. The delivery is free and hassle-free, even for the big stuff. Whether you're entertaining guests or just relaxing solo, shop Wayfair to help you unwind. When I moved into my new apartment, I was able to order everything on Wayfair, and they made the hassle of moving much easier than I anticipated. Shop a huge selection of outdoor furniture online this summer. Get outside with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair. Every style, every home. While Notre Dame has been on fire with recruiting lately, there are still some key gaps they need to fill to complete a championship caliber class in 2026. And let's take a look at where things stand right now. So Walton was the 16th total commit in this class, the 9th on the offensive side of the ball, and also the 9th since the start of April. Truly an unbelievable hot streak for Marcus Freeman and his staff. At quarterback, they've already got one guy, Noah Grubbs. At running back, they now have two, Javian Osborne and Jonaz Walton. At wide receiver, they have two commits, Dylan Faison, the younger brother of Jordan Faison, who's been committed forever. And then Bubba Frazier, recent commitment. At tight end, they still do not have a commitment in this class. I think that's going to change soon, but they need to get two. They do not have one right now. At offensive line, they have four commits: Gregory Patrick, Tyler Merrill, Ben Nichols, and Sullivan Garvin. On the defensive side of the ball, let's take a look at defensive end. They have two commits there: Rodney Dunham, the 5-star, and Ebenezer Iwatade, not far behind him. Just a great combo at defensive end, better than Notre Dame has been doing in years past at that position. And at defensive tackle, they have one, Tiki Hola, who just committed this past Saturday, chose Notre Dame over SMU and USC. Very much a need in this class, so it's big that they got Tiki Hola. At linebacker, they have two commits: Jacoby Clapper and Thomas Davis Jr. Thomas Davis Jr. did get an offer from Georgia recently. I'm surprised it took him that long, considering his dad was a great player for the Georgia Bulldogs, and Thomas Davis Jr. is a top 200 recruit in the country, but it took him a while. It sounds like he's locked in with Notre Dame, but obviously that is going to be something to monitor going forward. Cornerback, they have one commit right now in Chasten Smith, and at safety, Aiden Pouncey, although Aiden Pouncey could play cornerback, he's just such a good defensive back prospect. They're going to get him in this class, and I think they're going to find out his position fit later on. So when you look at that, that's a very good place to be in the middle of May with 16 total commitments. But let's look at what they need, or the biggest needs they have left. So I have defensive tackle at one. It was the biggest need of the class going in. Outside of quarterback, obviously, that's going to be the biggest need in every single recruiting class until the end of time. But for this class, Notre Dame really needed at least 2 to 3 defensive tackles because they have missed at the position for so many consecutive years. Getting Tiki Hola is a great start. They are far from done at that position. So I think defensive tackle is the biggest need left on the board. They need one, probably two interior defenders there. Then next up, I have wide receiver. Even though they already have two commitments, that's great. Bubba Frazier, Dylan Faison, probably more developmental prospects, undersized speedsters, which is great to have, but they probably need 2, maybe even 3 more wide receivers in this class, because that is another position that they have not recruited well historically. At 3, I've got tight end. Like I said, they don't have any current commits. They need 2, and they have not been able to get 2 commits in one class for a long time. They tried multiple years in a row, but they haven't been able to get it done. Even though I am super high on James Flanagan, obviously I think he's going to be the most impactful freshman on the team. Went on record saying that at the end of the last week, but you can't count on just one guy. Injuries happen. They need to get at least 2 tight ends in this class, and considering the fact that they don't have any right now, I have tight end at 3 for the biggest needs remaining in this class. At 4, I've got cornerback, just because they already have one in Chasten Smith, and I think he's a good player, but I think they need 1, maybe even 2 more, even though I love what they had in the last class with Cree Thomas, Dallas Golden, and Mark Zachary. I just feel like Chasten Smith, at one point, his commitment was wavering, especially after Chad Bowden left Notre Dame to go to USC, so I'm always going to be a little bit hesitant about his status with his commitment. Maybe he ends up being rock solid, signs with Notre Dame later on, but I'm keeping the eye out for cornerback. They need at least 1, maybe even 2 more there. Then at 5, I've got safety. Great that they added Aiden Pouncey, but again, he could potentially move over to cornerback. If that's the case, then they don't have any safeties in this class. So I have safety at 5, linebacker at 6. I like what they have in Clapper and Thomas Davis Jr., but they definitely need one more. I don't think they're going to get a player like Manfremo in last year's class or Kingsley Avellamo-Austin in the class before that. They're not really in the mix for any of those top-of-the-line linebackers, but they could still use one more. At defensive end, I got them at number 7. They're mostly done. They're obviously in great shape with Dunham and Iwatade. I think they could take one more, though. And I'll get to who that might be here in a second. At 8, I've got offensive line. They've got 4. I think they might take one more, but they're in really good shape. 9, I've got running back. They're probably done. Like I said, they can keep the door open. Who's going to walk in? I don't know at this point when you have 2 players who are as talented as Javian Osborne and Jonaz Walton in the class. Then at 10, quarterback, they're done. Noah Grubbs has been committed for like 5 years now. Not really, but he's solid with the Irish, and I feel good about his standing with the team. So of their biggest needs, the top targets left at defensive tackle, Elijah Golden, who they have been after for a very long time, prospect out there in Florida. It's going to be a tough battle, probably going to go down to the wire. Alabama's firmly in the mix. Florida is firmly in the mix, but Notre Dame really wants him. He would be their top target at the most important position on the defensive side of the ball. And then they got Alistair Vallejo. We've talked about him a lot recently on the show. Vallejo went from an unranked, pretty much unheard of prospect a couple months ago to now he's in the top 500 in the 24/7 Sports Composite. He's ranked number 440. And then 24/7 Sports, like their own recruiting rankings, they have him just outside the top 200. It's amazing what can happen in an offseason, and then once a few big-time schools start offering you, and then all the recruiting sites catch up. That is the case with Alistair Vallejo. So if they get those 2 guys, they would be in great shape. They're also still in the mix for Noah Clark, although I don't feel as confident about Clark as I do with Vallejo and Elijah Golden. At wide receiver, their top 2 targets remain the same. It's Kaden Finley, Braden Robinson. I think they were in the top 2 for both of those guys, but they have to land, not one of them, both of them, for this class to be truly elite, given the fact that they have missed out so many times on their top receiver targets, like last year it was Derek Meadows. That cannot happen in this year's class. I think Kaden Finley is a lot like Jaden Greathouse, plays for a big-time program in Texas, has a ton of production, is going to be very ready to play once he gets to college. Braden Robinson, a speedster out of Texas, who is actually friends with Javian Osborne and also Cohen Brown, who is the 3rd wide receiver, at least one of the main targets for Notre Dame at the wide receiver board right now. Recently decommitted from USC. Notre Dame is trying to poach him. And then they also recently offered Devin Fitzgerald, the son of Larry Fitzgerald, and he would join the many sons of former NFL greats if he were to decide to go to Notre Dame. They're also in the mix for Mason James as well. So there's 5 names right there. They're also after a few more, like they've been adding some late offers, but I think that Finley and Robinson and Brown are the names to know at wide receiver. At tight end, I think they're in great shape with Evan Jacobson. He seems like the most likely to commit, but Ian Premier would be a huge, huge get. Top 50 player in the country. Number 4 tight end of the class. He's from Kansas. He's seriously considering the Jayhawks and Kansas State, but if Notre Dame were able to land him and Jacobson, that'd be a great tight end class. I think Ian Premier could be awesome in college. They're also looking at Matt Ludwig, although he's predicted to end up with Michigan. Seen a couple crystal balls for him to end up picking the Wolverines. So they're after some top targets. They need to land 2 of the 3 that I just mentioned. At cornerback, it's Kari Adams at this point. I know that they're kind of looking at some other guys, but Kari Adams is a borderline 5-star prospect. He would be the highest rated cornerback to commit to Notre Dame in years. And even though Notre Dame has had great cornerback play under Mike Mickens with Leonard Moore, Benjamin Morrison, even Christian Gray, Cam Hart, Kari Adams could be better than all of those guys, or at least that's what his recruiting profile suggests. He is a freak athlete. This will be a very tough battle for Notre Dame to win. I could see it going down to the wire, but he is their top target left at the position. And then at safety, you've got Joey O'Brien, who is a 5-star now after some recent changes to the recruiting rankings. He might be the most sought-after player left on Notre Dame's board. It is a 2-team race between Notre Dame and Penn State. O'Brien is from Pennsylvania. It's going to be very hard to get him away from the hometown school, but he is that good. He's probably the closest thing to Kyle Hamilton that Notre Dame has had since Kyle Hamilton, if they're able to land him. And if they're not able to land Joey O'Brien, or maybe if they do land Joey O'Brien, they're in very good shape with Nick Reddish. I think that Nick Reddish is going to be a part of this class. He's not ranked nearly as high as Joey O'Brien, but he's a good football player. If they get them both, that'd be a huge win at safety. That linebacker, They've been after Tank King for a really long time. He's not ranked super high, but Notre Dame has made him such a priority. I think that shows you how the coaching staff feels about him. And even though linebacker, they already have 2 guys, it's not as big of a need as the other positions in the class. It is important that they get 3 and they get Tank King in this class. And then second to last for the biggest needs of the positions that they're still actively recruiting, defensive end. They've got 2 great defensive ends right now. If they get Mikhail Blade, this group would just reach another level. Like, we're talking best defensive end class Notre Dame has had in years. Mikhail Blade goes to Simeon, same school as Christopher Burgess Jr., who was in the last class, and it would just be a special group because Mikhail Blade has like the size that the other 2 guys don't have, so he brings a different element. I mean, don't get me wrong, Dunham, Iwatade, elite prospects, but if they're able to get Mikhail Blade too, that would just be awesome because it's such a position of need every single year. They're also looking at Drake Quinn out of Georgia. And offensive line, like I said, they're probably more than fine taking the 4 guys that they have currently committed, but they're also in the mix for Ekene Ugboko. That'd be an obvious take. He's a borderline 5-star. But when you look at what Notre Dame currently has in the class with their 16 commits, and you look at the guys left on the board, it would not surprise me if they took like 25, 26, maybe even 27 total players in this class. So clearly, Notre Dame has done a phenomenal job so far, but to truly seal the deal, they're going to need to lock in a few more high-impact guys. And if they do that, could Notre Dame actually finish with the number 1 class overall? That's next. Could Notre Dame finish with the number 1 recruiting class in the country this cycle? Personally, it's kind of hilarious that we're even seriously discussing this question because I remember the conversations about Notre Dame recruiting back in February and even as recently as March when they had 0 momentum and I was getting questions in the mailbag like, what's wrong with Marcus Freeman? Why aren't they getting commits? This team just went to the national championship. Is the recruiting program broken? Is Chad Bone that big of a loss? Like, things were not great. Okay, but then they've added 9 commitments since the start of April. They've got things rolling right now, and they are currently ranked 2nd in the country according to the 24/7 Sports Composite. The way they do it is a point system. Notre Dame has 251.16 points. USC is still number 1 with 289.30 points, and then Ohio State is close behind Notre Dame with 236.99 points. But USC, despite the fact that they have their number 1 class in the country, they just lost their top commit in the entire class. 5-star Xavier Griffin. He is a top prospect. Look at every single site in the country. He decommitted from USC, and it's kind of funny because this has become a trend with the Trojans. They consistently get a really highly rated prospect out of Georgia, usually on the defense, to commit to them, and then they always end up decommitting in the summer. It just happens every single year. In the case of Xavier Griffin, he's from Gainesville, Georgia, so he's out. He wanted to schedule some visits this summer, and it seems like USC is employing the Marcus Freeman / Chad Bone strategy. Their philosophy is if you are committed, you're not taking any visits. Does that sound familiar? It's probably because Notre Dame also had that in place with Chad Bone over there. But the Chad Bone formula, get a ton of guys to commit early, and then in a lot of cases, you end up losing them late, especially the top guys. And USC does have 11 more commitments than Notre Dame right now. They have a whopping 27 commitments in March, but they only have 2 more blue chip prospects. And if you don't know what a blue chip prospect is, it is a 4 or 5-star. So yeah, they're racking up a bunch of commitments right now. There's a lot of guys in their class that are not recruited particularly, or they're not ranked particularly high on the recruiting sites, but that is their plan. But they just lost their top guy. If that trend continues, they end up losing more of their top guys. Notre Dame could jump them. But it's not just Notre Dame that they're competing against. Ohio State is going to land more commitments. Alabama is going to land more commitments. Georgia is going to land more commitments. LSU, Auburn. There are a lot of schools who are just sort of waiting. And if Notre Dame is going to be able to get to that top spot, they're going to need a commitment from pretty much every single guy I just listed in segment 2. Specifically, Joey O'Brien, Kari Adams, Ekene Ugboko, Caden Finley, Braden Robinson, Ian Premier. Those are the elite prospects, top 100 players in the class that Notre Dame is after. Does that seem like a lot? Yeah, because it is. That's what it takes to finish with the top recruiting class in the country. You have to land all those top 100 guys in order to be the top class in the country. Notre Dame has not finished with the top 3 class since 2013. It's been a while. And even though Marcus Freeman is a great recruiter, he's elevated the expectations for recruiting in a place like Notre Dame, but he still hasn't even finished with the top 5 class. Last year's class wasn't even in the top 10. So it is going to be a big, big challenge. Those schools I just mentioned, the heavyweights, Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, they're still after several high-profile targets. They're going to land some of them because a lot of the top guys are considering all three of those schools. And then for Notre Dame, they have to maintain all of the commitments they currently have until signing day. And as we've seen in the past, that is not always easy. And a lot of the elite guys, like the five-star guys who are being recruited by every single school in the country, they have a tendency to wait until the very last second to commit to their schools because they're going to wait and see. They're going to enjoy the process. They're going to enjoy going on their official visits, experiencing the red carpet that gets rolled out for them at every single one of these schools. They're going to get to hear all the NIL offers and get to enjoy all the great things that come with being a top recruit. And even though Notre Dame is in the mix for some top guys, like a Kari Adams or an Ian Premier or a Joey O'Brien, they're not in it enough for like the top 10 prospects in the country. Like Rodney Dunham is 15 on the 24/7 Sports Composite. So I find it hard to believe personally that Notre Dame could finish with the number one class in the country, but they could absolutely finish in the top 5. It's going to be difficult, but they can do it. And that alone would be a huge win because, like I said, they have not had a top 5 class in over a decade. So if they're able to make that jump, coming off a trip to a national championship, I think that bodes super well for them going forward, and then they'll be even closer to getting a number one class down the road. There's still a lot of work to be done. I feel like Notre Dame is in great position with their NIL structure. In the past, I think that they were not willing to present any upfront money to high school recruits. I think that has certainly changed, and I think we as a fan base, and really just in college football, like when NIL is brought up, people get so weird about it. Like Jackson Cantwell is the number one prospect in the country. He's a tackle that just picked Miami over Georgia. And he got like really defensive. The entire Miami fan base got really defensive because people, reporters who know the truth had the audacity to say that NIL was a factor in the decision. And then he got all defensive. He's like, no, it's about development and relationships and all that stuff. That's fine. But NIL was definitely a part of the picture because Georgia has been much better than Miami in years past. I don't even know how I got on this tangent, but my point is that Notre Dame has their NIL structure in place. They're able to compete with these top teams and go after some of the top targets on the board, but they're not willing to give quite as much money as, say, a Miami or an Auburn, and I think that's another reason why they won't necessarily land the top class in the country. Also, the obvious restrictions that Notre Dame has been dealing with for years in the recruiting trail, but I feel very, very good about this recruiting class. The right pieces are falling into place, and the Irish have what it takes to ultimately land inside the top 5. That would be a massive step forward. They've got things rolling right now, heading into a very pivotal time of year, and I'm very excited to see how this shakes out. All right, that is going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Irish. Thank you for making this your first watch or listen of the day. Don't forget, tomorrow is the Friday mailbag, so consider this your last call for questions. Drop below in the YouTube comments. Hit me up on X at Locked On Irish or DM the show on Instagram at Locked On Irish Pod. I'll do my best to get to all of them on the show tomorrow. And if you enjoyed the show today, make sure to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button. It really helps get the show out to more Notre Dame fans. And if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, wherever else you get your podcast, a 5-star rating and a quick review go a long way. Have a great day, everybody. I'll see you Friday.